Hi guys, welcome back to Snapshot. I'm Kieran.
And I'm Saskia. Last week's show saw some disco fever take over the studio in our 70s episode, where we got a crash course in platform shoes and Pink Floyd, and I finally got to see Kieran in some flares.
And you'll never see it again. This week, we're taking on the 80s, and as always, we'll be bringing you the best music, movies, and fashion from the decade, showing you what it was like to be a kid back then.
We're exploring 80s Edinburgh as Snapshot's resident music nerd Jack visits some local venues that saw some of the decade's biggest acts.
And we step out of the studio to get a proper 80s makeover in local vintage shop Armstrong's.
But first, in-house movie buff Ewan visits Edinburgh's best independent cinema, The Cameo, to find out what makes 80s films so great.
The 80s introduced better special effects, bigger blockbusters, and a whole load of films having about 400 pointless sequels, although Terminator 2 was pretty great.
Terminator 2 was awful, and cyborg assassins are not good father figures.
You better not let Ewan hear you say that.
Anyway, the love and appreciation most 80s kids have for these films is still huge, even now that they're adults. So we had Ewan go and find out why.
Edinburgh has a strong relationship with film. In fact, often here it feels like you're only 6 foot away from a cinema at any given time. For example, behind me stands The Cameo. It's a cinema that blends classic screens with also modern day works. So I decided to venture inside to learn a little bit more about the 80s. There were some genres that were huge in the 80s. We had some great horror films like Poltergeist and The Nightmare on Elm Street, and some brilliant comedies like Ghostbusters and Airplane. And the advancements in special effects meant there was a whole new series of science fiction films. But perhaps above all else for 1980s kids were the coming of age films. But enough of this, time for some popcorn. One of the main men behind these films was director John Hughes, responsible for movies such as Ferris Bueller's Day Off and The Breakfast Club. Further hits in this genre were The Karate Kid, Dirty Dancing, Stand By Me, and all these films have special significance with 80s teenagers. Big budgets, big explosions and big muscles, onto the action films. A staple of this genre were the brilliant one-liners, and happily I've put together my own compilation of my very favourites.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
I'll blow this whole place up!
Go ahead. I don't shop here.
You're hit. You're bleeding, man.
I ain't got time to bleed.
I ate green berets for breakfast.
And right now, I'm very hungry.
How's your Arnie impression?
Get to the cinema.
It's pretty good actually.
Do you want to hear my Stallone?
Moving on. Having looked at specific genres, the 1980s also saw the rise of high-concept films, with every studio looking to make their own Star Wars or Jaws franchise. High-concept films are those with a premise that's easy to sum up in just a single sentence. Consider, for example, Turner and Hooch, a film where a policeman teams up with a lovable big dog. This type of film has a huge potential market because, well, who doesn't want to see a movie where Tom Hanks befriends a large dog? In conclusion, the 1980s were an important decade for film and gave its teenagers many captivating and endearing moments. It was also the decade where the rise of the franchise and sequel began. And thinking about it today, how many of the films you're excited for are prequels, sequels or reboots? Regardless, it'll be interesting to see where films take us in 30 more years.
Hey Doc, we better back up. We don't have enough road to get up to 88.
Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Thanks, Ewan. Maybe Arnie isn't so bad after all.
And it wasn't just the movies that got more ridiculous. The music took a bold turn too. From Queen to David Bowie to Elton John, wherever you turned, you saw music heading in an exciting new direction.
Jack had a look around Edinburgh's best venues, where your parents might have gone to see their favourite bands.
Today, we're in Edinburgh, and I'm exploring some of the city's biggest music venues to see what they were doing in the 80s and to see how they're holding up today. Let's go hunt them down. we made it. We're here at the beautiful Usher Hall that's been standing in Edinburgh city centre for over 100 years. It hosts a number of music shows, but in the 1980s it was actually the home of the Edinburgh Commonwealth boxing. Here on the incredibly busy Lothian Road stands what used to be the HMV Picture House. Unfortunately for the generation of today, it's since been taken over by a pub brand. So back in the 80s you would have come here with your friends to have seen big acts such as R.E.M., The Smiths and New Order, but now you're just going to come here with your folks and get a fish and chips. I went that way. I couldn't have gone that. So, now we have the old Odeon Cinema. Looking at the state of this building, it's hard to believe that it once housed the biggest names in music. In the 1980s, bands like Iron Maiden, Madness, Duran Duran and Motorhead all played this establishment. Unfortunately, since 2003 the doors have been shut and it's just become a glorified poster board. Well, that was exhausting. But it was great to get out in Edinburgh and see how all the old venues are doing. Anyway, that's me for now. I'll see you guys in a bit.
My mum saw Queen at the Picture House in Edinburgh and she said it was just amazing, but that was longer ago than she'd like to admit. Jack's back in the studio to show you how 80s music is still having an impact on dance floors today. I just hope that he's not the one on the dance floor because that would not be pretty.
Well, at least it would draw attention away from my dancing. You may not realise it, but plenty of songs today owe a lot to chart toppers from the 80s, and Jack's going to show us why.
It's clear that music of today has been influenced by the music of yesteryear. From the introduction of synths and electronic music to the evolution of metal, modern music hasn't fallen far from the tree. Let's have a look at how the music from the 80s is still alive and kicking.
Yo-yos, that's the way you do it. You play the guitar on the MTV.
This is the original song from the 80s, and as we can hear, there is a lot of natural music, simply played on guitars, a bass and drums, and the vocals.
We got to install microwave ovens, custom kitchen delivery. We got to move.
This is the same song, but it's been covered and adapted to fit the show. The music and the chorus are the same, but effects have been added with digital technology. Also, the verses adopt an R&B/rap approach. This is very typical 80s metal. Long hair, punchy guitar riffs, gruff voices, and a prominent drum line. The amps and tech were simpler then, and we're hearing more natural sounding music in this version. The guitars sound heavier and crunchier. Amps and pedals have changed to further drive the sound. Everything is faster, stabbier, and the singing uses a lot more screaming than the 80s. Very little in the way of natural sounds here. This song was played on a piano guitar and keeps a steady pace. This is an example of early synth pop music.
Call it love and devotion. Call it a mom's adoration. Foundation, a special.
Very electronic, sounds further away from the natural sounding instruments and then the 80s synths. The synthetic sound gives the song an ambient and magical feel. In each example, we got to hear just how far music has come in the past 30 years since the 1980s. More can be done to enhance the sounds of the instruments, like in the Money for Nothing example. Metal got heavier and angrier in Holy Diver. And electronic music has managed to make unnatural sounds work as music. That's about all we have time for on music, so I'll pass you back over to Kieran and Saskia now.
Thanks, Jack. And as promised, we went to Armstrong's where we swapped our regular clothes for something a little more colourful. I even managed to convince Kieran to try on some outfits which were very adventurous.
More like forced, and adventurous mostly meant getting dressed up like idiots. Let's take a look.
When in this charming car about these things. He knows so much about these things. I would go out tonight, but I haven't got a stitch to wear. This man said it's gruesome that someone so handsome should care. Na, 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 na. This charming man. Na, 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 na. This charming man. Ah! A jumped up country boy who never knew his place. He said, return to me. He knows so much about these things. He knows so much about these things. He knows so much about these things.
Well, I think you had more fun than me. You could have at least found a dress that fit me, and purple isn't even my colour.
Oh, don't lie. Didn't you like it so much that you bought it to go with those sunglasses?
Well, when we were out finding the most ridiculous clothes we could, Corinne was back in the studio doing some actual work. Here she is to prove that 80s fashion hasn't just stayed in the 80s.
Thanks, guys. So, the 80s are back, but before you get your lycra and leg warmers ready, not everything is making a comeback. From big shoulder pads to gigantic earrings, there are quite a few staples from this outrageous and over-the-top decade making an appearance this season. It doesn't matter if you look at the runways or your favorite brands like H&M, Zara and Urban Outfitters. The 80s are everywhere. But don't worry, it's definitely way more stylish than the outfits your parents used to wear. If you didn't have an oversized denim jacket covered in pins and patches in the 80s, you were doing something wrong. Now, over 2 decades later, customized denim jackets are 100% back. Like this one, covered in patches. My favorite are the cannon patch and the green one with the panda. You can easily customize your own and build up your patch collection over time. Check out Etsy for some cool patches that no one else will have. Another trend which is having a comeback is metallics. Shirts, tops or dresses, you name it, it's all silver, gold and copper. I've been loving pairing a white t-shirt under my silver dress for that ultimate cool girl look. And guys can't escape the trend either. I had a little browse on ASOS and found a denim jacket with metallic highlights, a casual way to rock this trend. Now, this trend might not be for everyone, but it's one I really love. Granny chic. Ruffles are everywhere, and as you can see by the top I'm wearing, I just can't say no to the ruffle. This one I actually picked up from a charity shop for £4, but just like with everything I mentioned, you can find modern versions on the high street.
Thanks, Corinne. I think I'm gonna have to get my hands on that patch jacket. Well, that's a Snapshot this week. We hope you had fun and catch us next episode,
Where we'll be taking you to the 90s and charting the rise of grunge. Right, Jack?
See you next week.